All right, everybody. Pat Leonard here from Lincoln Financial Field, talking ball with Pat Leonard. I am the Giants and NFL columnist and beat writer for the New York Daily News here on the Believe Network. Thank you for joining me here after the Giants lose to the Philadelphia Eagles in their season finale to fall to 3-14 on the year, and they end up with the number 3 overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. Of course, there are Giants fans, who will be pleased, at least with the draft pick that their team has ended up with, given the fact that entering the day, the Giants could have fallen back as far as 9th, as the Giants ended and snapped a franchise record 10-game losing streak with a win over the Indianapolis Colts, jeopardizing and then risking and losing the number 1 overall pick in the process. But they score a victory over the Colts. They end up sliding to 3rd behind 2 teams that need quarterbacks in the Tennessee Titans and the Cleveland Browns at numbers 1 and 2. The New England Patriots, meanwhile, winning their season finale against the Buffalo Bills, and Jerod Mayo, the head coach, one and done in New England. And the Krafts, Robert and Jonathan Kraft, looking ridiculous for grooming Jerod Mayo while Bill Belichick was still in the building for a job that he was completely unfit for. This was something that a lot of people in New England could see coming and knew from the jump that Mayo was not going to be able to handle this. And the Krafts end up pulling the plug. Now, the Krafts don't deserve credit for much here. The Robert Kraft, Jonathan Kraft, remember the documentary that came out where it appeared they were trying to revise history of how New England got good and won Super Bowls in the first place, whitewashing that those years and those championships and that regime. But here's one thing Robert and Jonathan Kraft deserve credit for. They fired the guy. They saw that it didn't work. They know that Jerod Mayo was a disaster. They pulled the plug, and now they're going to try to get better. And at least what I had heard in the recent couple weeks, as Mike Vrabel made his rounds and starting doing interviews and becoming available to teams to talk to, he interviews with the Jets already. Great story, by the way, by my friend and former Giants beat colleague Zach Rosenblatt over at The Athletic on Mike Vrabel, his candidacy, and everything you need to know about him. But I had heard in the last couple of weeks that Vrabel quietly really wanted the New England job if it was going to come open. And now that job is open, and so would not surprise me if Mike Vrabel ends up being the head coach of the New England Patriots. In fact, when a team makes a change this quickly like this, the bottom line is normally the ownership either has somebody in mind or it's that bad. I think in New England, it's a combination of the two. Now, I bring that up in context of our conversation about the Giants to say that at least the Patriots understood how bad it was, pulled the plug, and they understand, at least in hindsight, they clearly didn't recognize it and they didn't remember it right away. But they recognize in hindsight that running Belichick out of there for Jerod Mayo, mistake. Now, clearly, power struggle, a lot of different personalities going on there. You're talking about a 6-time Super Bowl winning championship coach, though. You run him out for Jerod Mayo. At least you pull the plug and say, man, we really screwed up here. Robert Kraft essentially apologizing to his fan base. Now, what are the Giants doing? The Giants, at least according to several reports here on Sunday, January 1st, or January 5th, I should say, here in the new year, the Giants, according to Adam Schefter, according to Jay Glazer, these national insiders saying that they are leaning towards Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll both being safe for the Giants. That would mean the general manager and the head coach of the Giants returning for a 4th season with the team, despite a 3-14 record, despite going 1-12 in 13 meetings with the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles, despite never really competing in the NFC East, 0-6 in division, winless in division for the first time in franchise history, setting a new franchise record of 10 straight losses, 4-14-1 overall in division since they took over. The Giants also, some absurd stats about how bad it's been. They are 19-33-1 overall. They are 12-31-1 in their last 44 games. The slivers of hope. Malik Neighbors setting a franchise record for receptions in a season. Brian Burns after the game saying a lot of different things. One of the points he made about why he wants Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen back, he said that basically he got tired in Carolina of regimes changing every year. And he said, so, he just doesn't want to start over again. The exact quote from Burns, it happened to me 4 or 5 times. I don't know how many in Carolina. Do I want it? Not really. I would like some stability. I would like Daboll and Joe to stay so we could get rolling next year without having to start a whole new regime and whole new everything. That's been my life in the NFL so far. I also talked to veteran tight end Chris Manhertz. He said the players share in the accountability. It's not just up high. His quote was, everyone from the players on up has had a hand in this result, so I can't subscribe to the idea that it's just a leadership issue from the top. However, these are players speaking for themselves, speaking for their own individual situations and experiences. The fact of the matter is most of the player leaders who would normally be available to speak have abandoned the ship. They're out, they're injured, they're absent, they're unavailable. Brian Burns, interestingly, is really the only veteran under contract for next season with pedigree able to speak about this issue at all for the team. It is just a team devoid of talent, devoid of leadership, devoid of accountability. And that comes from the top. It comes from the draft picks. It comes from the head coach. It comes from the poor game management. It comes from staff turnover happening because of Daboll's poor management of the staff overall. Daboll was extremely difficult post-game in answering questions about his conversations with ownership from John Mara to Steve Tisch. He essentially said he expects to have normal conversations. Yes, we'll talk. He would not get into what he thinks is going to happen with his future. He would not get into whether he's concerned about it. He did admit that 3 wins is not good enough. He essentially cited the fact that, listen, I know that the results that we put on the field were not what we want and that they're below expectations. But here is the point I want to make as we get in, and I see the super chats rolling in, so I will get to Chris, Joel, and Mark first. Reminder, if you want to ask a question or have a comment addressed immediately, purchase a super chat or a super sticker, and I will jump right to it next in the queue. I really appreciate all you guys being here. Hundreds of people loaded up into the chat, ready to talk about Giants, talk about NFL. And just a reminder, right now, I'm feeling a combination of outrage over the Giants. I'm feeling a combination of frustration over so much losing football and so much misevaluation of what it should look like. And really the goal in the conversations that we have here are to identify the problems and create solutions. And I feel like also bring you guys firsthand accounts and information of what I have, what I believe, what I know, and sometimes what I forecast. So my final point before I get into telling you about our sponsors and we jump into our super chats and our questions with all of our loyal followers and listeners here on the Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard postgame live podcast on the Believe Network and on the PL on NFL YouTube channel. My final point is this. The Giants, if they retain Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, they do not deserve to be treated like a legitimate organization if they bring this regime back. They will have proven that they either don't know what bad football looks like or that they just don't care that much about the fact that it exists on their field, in their locker room, and in their building. It will reflect ignorance, incompetence, arrogance, the inability to self-evaluate, something that's been plaguing them for years. And for them to retain this general manager, to retain this head coach, they will just continue to set themselves back as an organization, and they'll just end up having to make changes a year from now. That's just where it's going to go. The Giants, from my vantage point, my personal belief, and I'll get into this talking about your questions as well and answering your questions, but I would say this. I still don't think the reports on Sunday morning that both of them are safe, I don't take that as fact. I take that as the fact that that's on the table, but I still believe there will be firings up on high with either the GM or coach or both when all is said and done. Part of that is this. Part of that is, as critical as I am of the Giants, of John Mara, Steve Tisch, and of the ownership and of the Giants leadership, there is a part of me that is trying to continue to give them the benefit of the doubt that as much as they've fallen so far as an organization, as a franchise, and as football minds, that they have to look at the schedule, look at the results, look at the offense, look at the locker room, look on the field. They have to have an understanding that this is unacceptable, and they cannot, above all, send a message to the fans that they accept what they have seen and what they have deployed in these games in what you want to call competitions, but a lot of them have not been that. I go back to Joe Schoen at his bye-week press conference seeming nervous and really sounding like he understood how bad it's gotten and accepting responsibility for a lot of problems that he had either fought back against as being true prior or that he would dismiss previously. I think that Joe Schoen understood that his neck was on the line here. I think Brian Daboll has understood his neck was on the line here. And frankly, I also believe and know, this isn't what I believe, this is what I know. I also know that, and listen, it's their prerogative. I say this all the time. It's their prerogative. This is they can do this. They have the right to do this, to talk to their friends in the media, to explain to them what they feel is true or what message they want out there. That's totally fine. Nobody begrudges that at all. Except if it's misleading people, except if it is not the truth or it's smearing people who are telling the truth. And one fact that I know, incontrovertible fact about this Giants regime, is that they work the media harder, the national media harder, than any regime I've seen here in New York so far. Why does that matter? It matters because I believe that the message that we are hearing from the national insiders on the morning of the final Giants game of the 2024 NFL season here on January 5th, 2025, I believe that part of that message is coming from the people whose necks are on the line. So it's still possible that they come back. It's still possible that the Giants are doing the unthinkable in my mind, but not official yet. And that brings me to our sponsors, MyBookie, Boom Chaga, and Estate 98. MyBookie has been rolling out the red carpet for sports bettors this season. MyBookie and I have been making you money this year with our Pats picks. Week 18's tough. Everything's up in the air. These games go either way. A lot of them go down to the wire, players being pulled, resting, guys going down maybe a little quicker with injuries because if something starts ailing, they don't want something to be so serious that's going to jeopardize their availability for 2025. But by and large, this has been a tremendous season. I can't wait to kind of tally up the numbers going into the playoffs and tell you guys how well we did. And I hope that you took advantage of it. MyBookie, there is a link in all my social media profiles. It's mybookie.ag. And if you use the Pats Picks promo code, PATSPICKS, that will get you a 50% match on your first deposit of $50 or more, all the way up to $1,000, plus a $10 casino chip. MyBookie, bet anything, anytime, anywhere. We will continue with MyBookie Pats Picks, my Giant sprinkles, and all kinds of stuff going into the playoffs, the postseason, all the way through the Super Bowl. I mentioned it on my social media, but I gave this out to a few friends the other day. I should have just put it online, but I gave out Baltimore Ravens plus 3,000 first touchdown as their defensive touchdown yesterday, and it hit. So I will be making you money. You sign up with MyBookie, take some interest in tailing those Pats picks. Also brought to you here by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today. Type in this code right here, TalkinBall25, or access it through the QR code on your screen, and you'll get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. So that's 25% off, only $30 for the bag. Boomchaga.com. Start feeling the difference today. And brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, an all-natural specialty coffee that prevents you from having to wait in those long lines for your coffee. It takes only 10 seconds to make it delicious, hot or iced. Estate 98 Coffee. It's great as a mixer for espresso martinis, and each bottle can make up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/talkinball and get an 80% off your first order. Exclusive discount here on Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard on the Believe Network and on the PL on NFL YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our channel if you didn't already. And as Patrick always reminds you, thank you, Patrick, hit that like button. Those likes while we are live brings more people to our conversation. Thank you so much for being here. We start with our super chats. And we start with Chris Spires, who says, hope Mara is not stupid enough to bring back coach and GM. Chris, I think John is thoughtful. I think he's always thinking very hard and deeply about what the right thing is to do for his organization. I just think often he has made the wrong decision. And I agree with you. I think it would be reckless and ludicrous and absurd to bring back this coach and this general manager, both of them. I did not see John Mara today. He might have been here. I did not see him. I did see Steve Tisch. Steve Tisch was here, was escorted by several security guards out of the stadium after being in the postgame locker room. Very interested to see how this gets judged, how ownership comes down on this, what these meetings consist of with Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen. Brian Daboll was combative, defensive, and difficult in his postgame press conference. He was asked if he has received any word from ownership. He says, yeah, I talk to ownership all the time, so I'm sure we'll have another meeting here, but I'm in constant communication with those guys. Someone said, have you been given any indication on whether you're returning next year? He said, yeah, I'm sure we'll talk. Someone said, was that a yes to you returning or a yes to whether you will not talk with ownership or whether you'll talk with ownership? He said, yeah, like we normally do after games, we'll sit down and have a conversation. So it was almost like a who's on first conversation, trying to get Brian Daboll to discuss what exactly is going to happen here, what he is forecasting, how he feels. He said, here's the most meaningful quote that I have on Daboll from this season. He said that he expects to – I usually have conversations with him after games. The next days throughout the week, we've talked quite a bit, I would say. You are what your record says you are. We just ended this year. Disappointing loss today. They have an 8 o'clock team meeting with the players. That's what Brian Daboll has scheduled for them for Monday morning. Joel says, Pat, how much of this season you feel came down to our quarterback situation? Joel, I think that the quarterback, of course, affects everything. I think you could say that for every organization, the successes and failures of any team. I think you could point directly to the quarterback situation as a key component in the success or failure of that team. I think that the combination of Brian Daboll's poor play calling, the inability of the Giants staff to get the most out of their weapons, Daniel Jones's mistakes playing on the field, the offensive line struggles, dropped passes, penalties, rampant penalties, and operational problems, whether it's game management-wise or penalties, pre-snap penalties. I view this as a full-scale, team-wide problem, especially on offense. And I think that the roller coaster at quarterback is one of the key elements. Like when we talked to Brian Burns after the game today, the two main things he cited about the difficulties of this season were that they had a lot of young players, so implying that a lot of the youth didn't handle the adversity well or made a lot of key mistakes early in the year. And the other thing he cited was how many different quarterbacks played and how much adversity they battled, injuries, etc. And clearly the personnel selections at quarterback and the rotation of them all contributed to the mess that the Giants became in these last couple years. Not to relitigate it, but clearly the Giants did not react properly, personnel-wise or coaching-wise, to their minimal, unexpected success of 2022. Mark says, what draft capital did the Colts victory cost us? Well, Mark, the Giants, by winning that game, ended up with the third pick instead of the first pick. So the Tennessee Titans and the Cleveland Browns and the Giants, all three finished with a league worst 3-14 record. So if the Giants had not beaten the Colts, they would have finished 2-15, and they would have had the number 1 overall pick in the draft. So one strange thing about this game compared to the Colts game is that the Giants, when they played the Colts, they went balls out to win, right? The Giants put everything out there. They went out and they beat the Indianapolis Colts. They scored, 45 points, something they hadn't done in forever. And they win a game when they have a 10-game losing streak, franchise record, and when Brian Daboll's back's against the wall, Joe Schoen's back's against the wall, right? So at that point, fans were really upset because it's like, wait, you might have cost us the number 1 pick. But on the other hand, there were some fans who said, well, at least I saw some competent football finally. So what was strange about this Philadelphia game, where the Giants lose to the Eagles 20-13, despite the Eagles playing almost all backups, is that the Giants then started putting backups in and out of this game. They started taking starters off the field in the first half. They started subbing guys in and out. And it became a thing where it looked almost like a preseason game. It was like a little bit more from the starters than you would see in a preseason game. But by and large, a lot of preseason looks to it. Guys like Daboll Wilson, Boogie Basham, Anthony Johnson Jr., they put Josh Azudu at guard, something that is unheard of considering what the trajectory of his career has been. Just a real mess of kind of strategies mixing and stepping on each other's toes. Because if you're tanking and you don't mind losing and you're trying to get the high pick, then you treat the last few games like that and you just lose out, you get the number 1 pick. What's the purpose of going hard to beat the Indianapolis Colts, but then taking guys off the field left and right against the Eagles, seeing if you can end up possibly losing that game as the guys on the field are playing hard and fighting? What's the purpose of kind of shifting that all around and mixing that with that Colts strategy? It's almost like 2 different approaches to the last 2 games of the season. And I think was all said and done, it feels like, to me, this is just my perception, it feels like the Giants, their head coach and their team was operating going into the Colts game like, our jobs are on the line. We have to show improvement. We have to show that we can score points and win a game. And then after they did that, they approached this game with an element of, if we're coming back next year, let's evaluate these players. Let's look at some of the young players, the draft picks, the backups. Let's try to do what we can to get Malik Neighbors his record. And Malik Neighbors did set the new Giants receptions record for a single season. He breaks Steve Smith's record from 2009, which was 107. Neighbors finishes with 109. And even like you looked at the end of the game, they were putting Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau in only for key third downs down the stretch where they could pin their ears back and pass rush. Kayvon Thibodeau stacks a couple sacks onto his total for the season, but then also provides a costly kind of hands to the face, roughing the passer penalty on Tanner McKee that helps the Eagles end up icing it and closing it out before the late Drew Lock interception intended for Jalen Hyatt. So all in all, very confusing how the Giants handled this down the stretch. But to answer your question, Mark, in a roundabout way, sorry for being long-winded there. I hope that provided some context from my vantage point, but it cost the Giants the number 1 overall pick. Chris Spire says, if the Giants keep the GM and coach, us fans need to boycott going to games and not buy season tickets. That's your prerogative too, Chris. That's your prerogative. I think the fans have spoken. I think that one thing I've noted in my column for the New York Daily News is I believe that it's almost become the shock value has been lost from the planes flying overhead multiple times and the multiple reports of more planes were coming, but then they didn't in the last two games, supposedly due to weather. It was clouds over the last game. It was wind over this one. Who knows if that's true? Who knows if somebody made a call and tried to stop it? But the bottom line is this. Just because the shock value of the planes and the fan outrage and frustration has tapered off, you can't forget why that exists. You can't forget that that comes from a place of fans who are fed up with watching this. And really, and this is where I give you credit, Chris, there is, and now I'm not telling people to stop buying tickets to Giants games. You can do that on your own, or you can keep buying season tickets, do whatever you want. But I'm saying that your perspective and your opinion there is one shared by many. Fans can only be told a version of the truth so many times before they're going to put their foot down and tell the organization, you can tell me whatever you want, but here is what I see, right? So that's what I think you're doing, and I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. I think any fan has every right to feel however they want about their team. But I do think that being beat over the head year in and year out with a sales job that is disingenuous, not true, and honestly insults the fans, I think invites the kind of frustration that you are articulating. John says this organization will always stay the same, pathetic ways, until John Mara wakes up and takes a seat and hires someone else to run football operations. And you know what? This is something that some of you have said this in our Talkin' Ball chats. I have resisted kind of vocalizing it on my own as loudly as some of you have. But really, I'm going to give them a chance to make what I think is the right decision here. But if they bring back both Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll and they try to sell that that's the best thing for this organization and for this team, then I do believe it's time for Roger Goodell to go Pete Rozelle and step in and help the Giants, because it will be clear at that point that they don't have a solution. They don't know what they're doing, and they need somebody else to show them the way. The way I compared it in the New York Daily News today is that the Giants have been in the basement so long and in the darkness so long that their eyes have adjusted and now they can see perfectly, and they're confusing it with the lights coming on. That's my metaphor for where the Giants are right now. Steve Keys says if the GM and coach are retained, they will reach for a quarterback at 3 if Sanders and Ward go 1-2, Gettleman redo. Well, they could also go Travis Hunter at 3 and then end up signing a bridge quarterback and drafting one the next year. Or how about this? What if one of the teams ahead of them takes Hunter just because they have that high of an opinion of him as a player? And then do the Giants still get the quarterback but end up getting the one that a quarterback needy team passed on, right? Because of their evaluation of him both on and off the field, right? Like, this is just, there are no guarantees. That's the bottom line. And so there would have been no guarantee if they had the number 1 pick either. So you can make that argument too, right? Number 1 overall, number 3 overall, there would have been no guarantee either way. But, you know, who do the Titans and Browns take ahead of you? Who's available? What's the best way to go about it? Do you really want this GM and coach making a quarterback selection, given how desperate they are to save their jobs? And here's another concern I have. Another concern I have is listening to the report from Adam Schefter on ESPN, where he was leaning safe for these two, Joe Schoen and John Mara. This was scary. And this is something that some people had mentioned to me coming into this weekend, but more as conjecture and speculation on what was coming. But Adam Schefter reported that John Mara has railed against the NFL for making sure that the league doesn't have this dead money in coaches' salaries, and that Brian Daboll has got time left on his contract. Now, this is an implication, in my opinion, that the decision to keep a Brian Daboll and or Joe Schoen is related to money, saving money. You cannot be prioritizing that over winning games, please. If that's the case, well, let me say it this way. If they retain Brian Daboll, if they retain Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, then that implication of that report is that they are putting things over winning games, and money's one of them. So we're tired of paying Ben McAdoo and Pat Shurmur and Joe Judge while the other coach is while we're hiring the new guy. So because of that, we're just not going to change our coach this time. That's not an acceptable reason to not change your coach. Ryan H. says they should keep both or fire both. I agree with that in the sense, and we've talked about this before, but I agree with the idea that splitting the baby is a dishonest way of adjudicating this and of assigning accountability. And also, you just don't want to be putting a general manager and a coach on different timelines, right? So in that sense, are you hiring a new coach when Joe Schoen can be fired in a year? Or are you, people have thrown out the keep Daboll, fire Schoen. I never viewed that as likely. So this brings me to some things that I had heard. Now, I can't report to you what's going to happen. But a couple of things I know coming into this weekend, I know that the sense around the Giants, including from Schoen and Daboll, seemed to be that Schoen believed he was staying and Daboll believed he was going to be fired. That was the sense coming into the weekend. That was something I believe I said on the last Talking Ball. In some way, I mentioned that. And that's something that for the last 2 weeks or so was the operation of where the Giants were headed and how this was going to come to pass. I also heard today and through the grapevine the last, I would say, week, that there's some belief that Joe Schoen wants a new head coach in here. And so how does he finagle that, right? Do the Giants end up firing Brian Daboll, but does ownership put it on them and claim that it's them and not Joe Schoen, right? Which would be disingenuous because Schoen came in, hired Brian Daboll, brought in Brian Daboll as the package deal. It was collaborative, so to speak, right? So there's really no good way to do it. But that's one thing I had heard the last week or so was that Joe Schoen wouldn't mind having a new head coach in here. Now that's where you think about, okay, so is their decision dependent on who's available, right? Mike Vrabel, I believe, like I said, I believe he'll end up taking the New England job. We'll see. But that's what I had heard is that he wants that job. A hot candidate, obviously. So if other teams are firing people, might as well take those interviews. If you're Mike Vrabel. One name that was really intriguing to me, nothing's happened yet, but you saw the Browns fired their offensive coordinator and O-line coach, I believe. If Kevin Stefanski were to get fired in Cleveland, if I were the Giants, I would be interested in him if Schoen were to stay and Daboll were to go. But again, you're putting people on different timelines now, right? Is that fair? Might as well just rip it up like what I would do. I would want to hire Stefanski and a general manager that he can collaborate with, that he has a similar vision with, and create a united front there. So, but that's a candidate I find interesting as far as, is this person going to come available? Are they going to be on the circuit and a free agent, even though a week ago we didn't know if they were or not? Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy's a guy that the Giants have interviewed before. Is that a coach who is, is that a coach who is going to, like, if the Cowboys were to move on from Mike McCarthy, then the Giants would be significantly upgrading themselves by making him their head coach, especially as an offensive coach compared to Daboll. He's just a better offensive coach and play caller and quarterback developer. He just is. Or augmenter, I should say, for lack of a better term. But another coach who has stood out to me, and I've mentioned his name before, but I don't know what's going to happen in Cincinnati, but they're not going to make the playoffs. The Broncos are rolling. The Broncos are going to be in. The Bengals are going to be out. So are the Dolphins. If Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator of the Bengals, isn't retained, he and Schoen have a strong relationship. They work together in Miami. Anarumo's a really good coach. He's a New York guy. So if Daboll is fired and Schoen is kept, Anarumo would be a name to keep an eye on, in my opinion. Defensive guy, obviously. I don't know what the offensive coordinator, quarterback development situation would be there. Is if they retain Daboll and Schoen, which I think would be crazy again, but if they were to retain Daboll and Schoen and Shane Bowen were fired or not retained, again, I don't see any argument for retaining those guys and letting go of Shane Bowen, Brian Daboll's hire, who was only hired because Wink Martindale resigned because he didn't want to work with Brian Daboll anymore. You know what I mean? So, I'm not saying that that's a rational scenario. I'm just saying, if that happens, then and Anarumo isn't retained in Cincinnati, then I could see Anarumo becoming the Giants' next defensive coordinator. So I think that's a name to keep an eye on for both of those vacancies if he were to come available from Cincinnati. So, yeah. So much to talk about, and so glad you guys are here with me on Talkin' Ball live with Pat Leonard. I'm actually driving back up to North Jersey tonight after we're done here on Talkin' Ball live on the Believe Network. And here on my YouTube channel, PL on NFL is the handle. Subscribe and hit that like button while we are live if you haven't already. But driving up, usually what I do is I either stay the night before and just show up to the stadium early, roll over to the stadium from Center City or wherever I am, or I will do what I was planning on doing tonight. I was planning on driving down this morning like I did, and then staying at a hotel close to the stadium, and then taking off first thing in the morning tomorrow and going right to the Giants facility. The problem with that is the Philadelphia area here in South Jersey is about to get slammed by some snow. I don't even think the snow is really moving up and hitting us in the New York, New Jersey, tri-state area. So at least it wasn't in the forecast last night. I don't know if that changed. But so I'm doing the rare drive down, drive back in one day. I mean, I'm not working in the coal mines here. I'm not complaining or anything. But, this is the adrenaline rush / craziness / behind the scenes look at kind of the reporting prior to Black Monday, especially a Black Monday like this, where, like I said, there are things being reported that are going to happen. There is my feeling and conversations I've had and information I've heard about what might happen. And there's a lot of things bouncing around in your head. There's a lot of text coming into your phone calls to have on your drive back and forth. The kind of day and night where things could drop now, it could drop in the middle of the night. So hyper aware and looking forward to a full day of work on Monday, I would say, no matter what happens. Let's see. Oh, Mark says, I meant what capital does it cost us to trade up to get Cam Ward? If they can't get a quarterback, trade down if possible. Oh, so what kind of capital will it cost to move up from, let's say, number 3 to number 1? So you're talking some premium picks and at least one premium player usually. That number 1 pick is extremely pricey, Mark, because teams there, if they're going to trade out of the best player in the draft, they want to be compensated to the point where they are going to be, restocking their roster in several ways, because that number 1 pick is a premium. You talk about the Jimmy Johnson draft chart and how much it's worth. It is worth, exponentially more than any other pick in the draft. So that's where they stand. And I'm trying to call up the exact, like an exact example for you here. So this is the Trubisky Solomon Thomas pick. That was number 3 overall and number 2 overall in 2017. So in 2017, the Niners traded their 2nd overall pick. The Bears to go from 3 to 2. The Bears gave up number 3 overall, a 3rd round pick that year, a 4th round pick that year, and a 3rd round pick the next year. So that was to go from 3 to 2. So that gives you an element of understanding of kind of the amount of capital that you're spending that high in the draft. There was another trade more recently than that, though, at the top of the draft. By the way, interestingly enough, so the Jets and the Giants will both be picking high up in the order this year. And the last time, one of the most recent times they were both picking this high was, interestingly enough, the year that the Giants took Saquon Barkley, number 2 overall, and then the Jets traded up to 3 and took Sam Darnold. So full circle moment as Saquon Barkley stood on the sideline and watched the Giants lose again today as he crossed the 2,000-yard threshold last week. All right. Mark, I'll get some more information on that for you. There's a trade that happened recently that's escaping my mind at the moment. Someone can probably drop it in the chat and remind me. I'm sure one of our talking ballers will be faster to that than I am. I was just having this conversation with somebody earlier. All right, let's see. Chris says, I think the biggest problem with the Giants is too many Mara family members in the front office. Yeah, so Chris, one interesting thing about them is, the Maras are obviously a landmark family in the NFL with a lot of influence, long-standing franchise. This, of course, their 100th season. Imagine them going 3-14 in their 100th season. That is just what happened. By the way, my final record prediction for them, some places I had them at 3-14, other places I had them at 4-13. Either way, can't say I didn't see it coming. But Chris, to your point, to me, the Giants are at a juncture where you either go all in on this or you bail out. What I mean by that is, and I've said this before, John Mara always says Tim McDonald is a really good personnel evaluator. And I know that Tim does command some respect with, around the league as a personnel man. And he's done it for a long while. He's also, though, been party, just like everybody else here, no one else is different, to some key mistakes. But my point is, if you're John Mara, now Tim McDonald could be getting groomed to be, ownership, right? But might as well lean in and make him your general manager at this point. If you're going to plant your flag and stake your claim and as the Mara family, be adamant that the way you handle things as a family and as an organization is the right way and that you want to prove your doubters wrong, make Tim the general manager, lean all the way into it and show us why. Now, do I think they're going to do that? No, I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to. And I know some fans have said here, we're so frustrated with the fact that we don't feel like we operate like a 21st century organization. For them to do that would feel like we were going further back into the past. So I understand that vantage point too. I'm just saying if you've dug your heels in as the Maurer family, then that's where you go next. Joey B says, Pat, what's our money like this offseason and what can we do to make more? How can we capitalize on the draft and free agency? Thanks for a great year, Pat. Love this. This is the best part of the season. Thanks for saying that, Joey B. Yep, looking forward to a great 2025 here. Thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate you. Yeah, no, the Giants they're going to have some money to spend. projected cap space into 2025. I believe at the moment it checks in as 56 million. So that falls around, let's see, looks like about 15th or so, or 13th, something like that. Right now, the Patriots projecting at 131 million, Raiders 108, Commanders 102, Cardinals 89, Bears 82, Vikings 76, Chargers 76, etc. So the Giants falling in at the $56 million range. They'll have money to spend for sure, Joe, especially because even though there's some dead money obviously associated with it, getting rid of Daniel Jones, etc. The Giants are no longer, long-term paying a quarterback significant money at the moment. So you try to get out from under that. You have money to spend now, and you project you'll have even more money to spend the next year. The issue is that enough money that we just talked about there? Is that enough money, even if they start clearing more cap space, for them to become a competitive team next season? One of the other issues I have with the Giants retaining this regime, if they do, is the argument that's made by some people that they should rebuild this and that give them a chance to rebuild it. They just tore it down. Like even Joe Schoen, when he got hired, his first press conference, he mentioned that we're going to compete while we build. And if this is what competing while you build looks like, I don't see how you could rationalize, kind of a success in that hiring and in those evaluations and in those decisions that they've made to get to this point. I mean, I have to be honest with everybody. People in Philadelphia, for example, they hope the Giants retain Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. They can't believe a lot of people here, like they can't believe that, it's even a conversation. I think from the outside looking in, they almost view it the same way as the Daniel Jones debate. They view it as like like say outsiders said, well, even if we saw some positives, he wasn't any good and it wasn't going to last. I'm saying that's how Eagles fans and Cowboys fans and et cetera thought of Daniel Jones. That's their opinion of the Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll situation. It's like, well, why would there be a debate about this? They're not any good. They need to hire new people. So Mark says, would it be this year's first and second and next year's one? So yeah, let's zero in on this a little bit. So even though this is, this is updated from what it's been considered in the past and how it's been processed and discussed. But, sorry, here, freezing up. I have so many windows open on this computer with all the research I was doing for my story and doing for Talkin' Ball. Eagles Wi-Fi trying to drown me out here. So let's see. We have draft value chart. So, Mark, let's do this exercise together, shall we? So you have the Giants pick at number 3 coming in at worth 2,200 points, and the first overall pick being worth 3,000. So you have to make up, 800 points on that pick, but you got to do a lot more than that because teams essentially can hold you ransom, number one. And also the price can go up and up and up because you're going to have competition for that pick. It's not usual or typical that it's just going to be some team makes a phone call to you or you call them. And then it's just, Giants and Tennessee Titans figuring out a price. Not to mention, hard to imagine the Tennessee Titans are trading out of the number 1 overall pick where they can select a quarterback. They desperately need a quarterback. NYC TV NYC says you was try fire him since week 2. It's personal with you. I think you mean you were trying to fire him since week 2. No, definitely not trying, NYC. What I was asking Brian Daboll in week 2 about his job security, that was because I had heard prior to the season that if the Giants started, 0-4, 0-5, et cetera, and if the bottom started falling out early, that Daboll could get fired right away, and that it was possible that that was going to happen, that people in the organization needed to see some things out of him. And so that win in Cleveland staved off. It called off the Giants kind of called off the dog, so to speak, thanks to that win in Cleveland. But after that loss in Washington, based on how bad they looked, the coaching mistakes he was making, the game management issues, the kicker snafu with the injuries, like it was building and building and building. And that was based on information. None of this is based on my desires, my desires or hopes. That's totally irrelevant. That's not my job. Joey B says, why has Steichen kind of been quiet? Why isn't he being talked about being fired after the fall off from Wink? How does management not fire everyone? Yeah, I know, right? No, it really is amazing in Indianapolis. I do think there'll be significant changes in Indianapolis. I'm not sure if Steichen's going to be one of them. I do think it's deserved that it should be considered, especially when you heard what Pat McAfee has said about guys missing meetings, guys being late, just lack of discipline and accountability in that building, in the Colts building and within the franchise. I think that's an interesting one to watch. I mentioned this week, but you mentioned Wink Martindale. Wink is he's a candidate to watch to come back into the NFL. Martindale and Michigan with Sharon Moore as the young head coach there at Michigan, it started a little bit bumpy. They lost so many players to the NFL off of that national championship with Jim Harbaugh, but they found their sea legs, and especially on defense, the defense kind of just helped them not only tread water, but flourish down the stretch. They beat Ohio State and Alabama. They smothered them defensively. They held them to 3 combined points in the second halves of those 2 wins. Ohio State might win the national championship, and a Michigan team with a quarterback carousel and really not much offense to speak of beats them in the shoe. Martindale, an Ohio native, so it had to be an especially gratifying victory for him. But, there are some coaches like Chip Kelly, for example, who they've maybe had a cup of coffee of success in the NFL, but really in the end, it feels like they're more college guys, and that's fine. Being a college guy is fine. Martindale, though, is an NFL coach, an NFL head coach, an NFL coordinator. He's a guy with the kind of pedigree to match up with the, pick a name, Mike McCarthy, Kevin O'Connell, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay. All of these revered offensive coaches revere Wink Martindale, and they hate going up against his defenses. And I mentioned, the other day on social media and in the New York Daily News that Martindale is back on the NFL's radar. Talked to several sources who believe that he's going to have a lot of looks and a lot of interest from these NFL teams with jobs and positions coming open. And, I didn't mention it earlier because obviously it's not on the table based on what happened here. But the bottom line is like, it kind of feels weird to say this, but the Giants would be a perfect fit for a guy like Wink Martindale. They need better coaching on the defensive side of the ball. They need more aggression. And as a program, they need more culture. But they let him out the door. Joey B saying, I meant Bowen. Sorry. Oh, you're talking to – oh, okay. So you weren't talking about the Colts at all. That's funny. So why has Bowen been quiet, you're saying? Well, you know what I think, Joe? Just my vantage point as thank you again for the other super chat. Joey, I think that, first of all, to answer to your other question, the Giants they have to, with the money they have this offseason in their draft capital, same as last year in a lot of ways, they have to attack corner, offensive line, interior defensive line, and, you'd ideally like to add another receiver. I do think their backfield needs to get stronger. You obviously have to do something at quarterback. It starts there. Here's one issue. This is another issue with retaining these guys. It's like you have so much to do to the roster to be a good team because of what you've done to your team with this regime the last 3 years. Also, how do we forget? How do people forget? How do the Giants forget if they're going to bring these guys back? How is it not a factor that part of the reason they're so bad is because tons of coaches didn't want to be here anymore because of how bad it was to work here? Like, I don't follow or understand or grasp the absence of the context, Like, I once heard a complaint that I constantly brought up, like, kind of the context of things from the past. And I didn't let things go and lie in the past. Like, if I was writing about the 2023 team struggles, I would bring up something that happened in 2021 in the context of the discussion of what was going on now. But, like, to me, all of that is relevant. And, I think that 2023 is just as relevant to the need to make a change here as 2024 when I talk about the seasons. Now for Bowen, Joey B, part of the reason it's quiet around him, I think, is that, first of all, the defense hasn't been good enough, hasn't been close to good enough. The coaching, especially the individual lack of development of certain key players like Thibodeau and Banks has been bad, has been worse. I think also, though, it's probably in relation and connection to the fact that no one's really pointing a finger at Shane Bowen, because when your defensive coordinator leaves because of the head coach and the toxic environment and dysfunction of the organization, all the eyeballs and accountability is on the head coach and his seat and his role, and especially when he takes over the offensive play calling. And then the Giants, who had one of the worst offenses in the league last year, they end up worse as an offense the next year when Daboll inherits play calling. And how about this? There's been word and chatter that, like, Mike Kafka could end up being a scapegoat here. How could Mike Kafka be fired for the offense this year? He has nothing to do with it. From what we can see, he's basically just been an optics-led figurehead to try to help Daboll and Shane get through another year and prevent them from having 3 coordinators leave the last year. But that's one I can promise you, that would be good for Mike Kafka to get out of here. I'll tell you that. All right, let's see. Thank you so much, guys. Let's get into the queue here. Thank you so much for all those super chats. We have Peterstown says, how in the world does Mara save face by keeping these guys? Where the heck is Tish? Time for Tish to assert himself and start to push Mara aside a bit. Mara has become a joke of an owner. Tish was as present at this game as I've seen him this season. We'll see if that means any change. G-Men, I do not see it being the case that they bring them both back despite those reports. But those guys do good work, and they usually know what they're doing, obviously. I still think they make a change, but I could be wrong. Johnny says Daboll eventually realized, James Dolan, eventually realized to get out of the way, but Mara is now becoming the problem if he actually keeps Shane and Daboll. They regressed year after year. How do you sell the fan base on that? That's a great point. Wouldn't the Giants' openings be one of the most appealing for top GMs and head coaches? You have $60 million in cap room, number 3 pick, your choice of quarterback, or is the nepotism worse than we know? It's the nepotism. It's also the functionings of the organization, the fact that there are so many people in the organization who aren't even ownership necessarily, who are longstanding members of the organization who have a larger say than they should or than people in their roles normally have in those roles in other organizations. too many cooks in the kitchen. Tony says, 2 bad key traits. Not ready 2 years in a row to start the season and undisciplined all year. Jacob reminds everybody to smash that like button and that sub button for the best reporter in the biz. Thank you so much, Jacob, for always doing that. Jacob says, Pat, anyway, we still get pick of the quarterbacks. If quarterbacks are gone and Hunter is on the board, do you trade out or take Hunter? I think you probably take Hunter. I heard Mike Reese from ESPN, the Patriots reporter, say on Jordan Rodon's Breaking Big Blue podcast that, like, if the Patriots, for example, were in position where they they were talking about the number 1 overall pick, which the Patriots had going into today. And if the Patriots had the number 1 pick in this game or after this game and into the spring, Jordan asked Mike, you guys, they already have Drake May, at number 1, would they trade out or would they take a Travis Hunter? And Reese explained that, yeah, like the Patriots could be in a position in that sense. And so now it would be the Tennessee Titans. They could be in a position in that sense where they could get, a boatload back and rebuild a roster that needs a lot of pieces, but they also lack premier talent. They lack high-end talent. And so when you're a team that has so many holes, yes, you want to fill them all, but also you don't pass on premier players when you don't have enough of them on your roster. And so if the Giants were to miss out on the top 2 quarterbacks there at the top with the Titans and Browns ahead of them, I think you just take Travis Hunter right there at 3. Manzo says, we have had the worst quarterback room for 3 years. How does Mara trust Schoen to bring the next quarterback here? Manzo, your question answers itself. I don't know. I said this to somebody earlier. I firmly believe that one thing a lot of people inside the Giants and out forget is that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, they came from a Buffalo Bills program that, went on some runs and started becoming one of the teams that was winning more and scoring more. And Sean McDermott did some good things there. But by and large, the Buffalo Bills' ascension was they drafted a guy named Josh Allen, who is one of the best individual players in the league year in and year out. And, Brandon Beane drafted Josh Allen. And I think that Schoen and Daboll, while connected to that success and a part of that program, they had never been a general manager in Schoen's case or a head coach in Daboll's case. And that's, whatever. That's fine. You hire 2 people, first-timers, you pair them together, and you try to go off into the future and have them build your franchise from the ground up. But they did not – my point is they did not have a prior track record as a general manager or a head coach. So their record right now in New York through 3 years – their roster, their mistakes, their draft picks who haven't panned out, their players who mouthed off about the program, the frustrations in the locker room. That is all on their resume as their first and their only example so far of how they are as a general manager and coach. So the benefit of the doubt that the 2022 season buys you, like, to me, how does that go further than just that was an encouraging start, but? Because these guys have been making mistakes and learning on the job, and it's gotten worse and not better. And I don't think that's unfair. That might sound harsh, what I just said, and too direct for some people who don't want to face the truth. But there's no agenda there. Like, that to me is really how I see it. In 2 says, Daboll said he believes in the people and the process. Given the results, how could he? It's messages like that fly in the face of what we see that make him look like a clown. Yeah, and that's what I mean about insulting the fans. It's like, I believe in the players and the people in the process. He asked what the argument is for this program heading in the right direction. You can't point to any details. You can't point to any specifics. Well, we can't score and we don't win, but we'll get better and we believe in what we're doing. That's not a sell. It's not a sell. Yardley says, draft Cam Ward, if not, best player available. All right, let's see. Savage Steve, what's up? He says, I'm okay where we are drafting. We get either a quarterback or Travis Hunter. Mike says, we need O lineman. I would go with a top tackle. Steve says we need a quarterback and corner as well, and I don't trust Joe with his O-line picks. Again, why keep a general manager if you don't trust him to draft a key position on the field, right? That's, again, I hear you, though, Savage. George says, Pat, what are your sources saying? Definitely think I covered that, George. Obviously, you were here early on, an early riser to the Talking Ball chat today. I appreciate that. If I didn't answer any of those questions, let me know. But by and large, I believe that there still could be firings despite the reports. I'm flabbergasted at the reports. And, I think that my understanding or my belief is that Joe Schoen wants a new head coach, but is probably politically trying to play it down the middle and see if ownership will do it. Obviously it's kind of like one of those, it's like a Game of Thrones, actually. How can I stay and keep my hands clean and also make sure that the situation is good for me type thing, right? And then also there's a personal element to it that we're not privy to of their relationship and that backstory, and how does that factor into the exact conversations and the decisions that come to pass. But I think professionally, what I'm talking about, I think this is a scenario where I'm going to say this again. No one is telling me this is definitely going to happen. Okay. I want to be clear on that. No one is telling me this. I am still giving the Giants the benefit of the doubt until they announce otherwise, until it becomes official otherwise. I am going to give them a benefit of the doubt that they know this is unacceptable, and that for the sake of it, just showing people that you are not okay with this, you have to show people that this is unacceptable and we're hiring new people we think can get it right. Saul Goodman says, so we have reached the time, Pat. If you had to put a bet down on my bookie, would you say Daboll is staying or going? I know you have felt since Thanksgiving he's gone. Has anything changed? I would put down a bet that Daboll will be fired. But again, we've heard to the contrary in reports. I still think he's going to be fired. G-Man says it's the worst season in Giants history. Doesn't get this bozo coach and GM fired, then nothing will. Exactly. Mara will make us even more of a laughingstock by saying this is acceptable and worth another season. Totally agree. No one in the league again, I use the Patriots example right off the bat. People in the league are laughing at the Patriots for hiring Gerard Mayo and essentially letting him pick out the furniture in Bill Belichick's office and handpicking him to be a successor, right? They're laughing at them for that. But at least the Patriots said, yep, we really screwed that up. And now they're trying to make it right. Imagine being that laughingstock, but then not fixing it. That's where the Giants would be if they retain these guys. Baseball says, Pat, what do you think of Kingsbury as next Giants head coach? I think Cliff Kingsbury had an encouraging year so far as rebuilding his stock. I don't think he had obvious new head coach type year. I think Jaden Daniels is that special of a player. And I think Kingsbury actually was under fire at times in the middle of this season for his scheme getting a little bit stale, not necessarily employing all of Daniels' strengths to the max. And there was some restlessness going on amongst the fans, in Washington about kind of show us what you got. We have players now. So I don't view Kingsbury in that. I think the fact that his name is out there, hey, good for him if he gets some looks. But I don't think he's a hire this guy as your new head coach type guy. Peterstown says if Mara was going to fire the head coach and GM, he would have right after the game, as did Kraft with Mayo. This is a bad sign they aren't going anywhere, unfortunately. I don't agree with that, Peterstown. That's not normally how the Giants operate. Edwin says, fire everyone. Clean house, please. Reminder, we are brought to you by MyBookie, Boom Chaga, and Estate 98 Coffee. MyBookie rolling out the red carpet for sports bettors this football season and throughout the year. We'll take you right into the playoffs. Go to my social media everywhere, PL on NFL, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Threads, and on Twitter or X at PLeonardNYDN. Always letting go of my 3 or 4 top Pats picks of the week, as well as my Giants or NFL sprinkle with prop bets for you to play, long shots to try and hit. A lot of fun we've had this season. I've made you a lot of money this year if you've been tailing. Use that Pats Picks promo code. It's PATSPICKS at the link in all of my social media profiles, including on YouTube right here. You go to my profile page here on YouTube, and you should be able to find that. Click the link, enter that Pats Picks promo code, and you'll get a 50% match on your first deposit of $50 or more, all the way up to $1,000. Plus a $10 casino chip. MyBookie, bet anything, anytime, anywhere. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract, loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. Personally felt a post-workout like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health. With its beta-glucans and antioxidants, go to boomchaga.com today. Put in this code, TalkinBall25, or access it through the QR code on your screen and get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. You don't have to stay subscribed. You can cancel out the subscription after your first order. It's just a way to get the discount. So subscribe and save offer on boomchaga.com. Type in that code, TalkinBall25, or use that QR code on your screen. Get 25% off. And cost you only $30 for that full bag that'll last you a while. Boomchaga.com. Start feeling the difference today. Also brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, all-natural specialty coffee that will help you skip the lines. It takes only 10 seconds to make it delicious and quick. Estate 98 iced or hot coffee. It's also great as a mixer for espresso martinis if you like those. And it makes up to 16 cups each bottle of Estate 98 coffee. We will do an Estate 98 Giants trivia question on the chat tonight, so stay tuned. That'll get you a free bottle of Estate 98 coffee if you land that trivia question correct. But make sure you go today. A lot of people who have won the Estate 98 trivia and won those bottles have ordered more through this link with the special offer. It's estate98.com/talkinball. Click on that link or type in that link, estate98.com/talkinball, and you'll get 80% off your first order. Exclusive deal here with Talking Ball with Pat Leonard. Welcome to Talking Ball Postgame Live with Pat Leonard. If you're just joining us, we are here live from Lincoln Financial Field. I'm actually sitting in the Giants radio booth here after the Giants' 20-13 loss, falling to 3-14 in their 100th season as a franchise, 1-12 in 13 games against the Cowboys and Eagles since Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll inherited this team in this franchise. Can you imagine believing that that is okay? Can you imagine retaining that regime and telling your fans that you think that is okay? Can you imagine announcing to your fan base, just give us more time after all of that happens and comes down? Absolutely ridiculous. Believe it or not, though, there are still people who believe that should happen. I personally don't think it will, even though, of course, a lot of noise that that's a possibility. Candyman says, Kayvon, Neal, Banks, JMS, and Hyatt, all top picks that, in my opinion, have failed to different degrees. How can Mara possibly keep Shane? What free agents can we attract? T. Higgins is obviously a receiver who seems attractive, but don't you need a good quarterback situation to attract a guy like that? You want to pay him, money talks, but who's throwing to him, right? Are you getting that quarterback in the draft? Are you not? Are you signing somebody in free agent if you don't get that quarterback? I think you definitely need to continue to pay on the fronts, right? Offensive line, defensive line, quarter. You need to spend on those as well as quarterback and receiver, whether it's in the draft with assets or in free agency with money. Those are definitely, top investment areas. Safety is also a big concern. But again, didn't you just draft a second rounder in Tyler Nubin? And safety is still a big concern. This is the stuff with this regime. Okay. Fran says, Mara is losing it. He's getting soft, can't make decisions. It's easy. 2 planes, 14 points a game, bad secondary. Start over now. You left out a lot there, but that's pretty good. Francis says, don't worry, Shane has a plan. George says, interesting press conference from Daboll. Didn't sound like a guy who's expecting to be let go. On the other hand, he rarely ever shows his hand, so time will tell. So yeah, I don't think he didn't expect to be let go. I viewed that more as somebody who's trying not to accelerate it, trying not to add any fuel to the fire, trying not to, like Joe Judge at the end, all those frustrations build up, and he had that Chicago press conference that ended up not helping him in the end. I understood why he was doing it. I understood everything he was saying. I thought everything he was saying was dead on. But to me, I feel like Brian Daboll has been spending a lot of time trying not to have that moment where he blows a gasket at a press conference and it ends up not helping his cause in the long run. Will says, will Shane explain to the fan base why we should have hope with this leadership in place? Does he not owe some explanation to the fan base? Absolutely. And not a kind of explanation that, is stretches of the truth of look at all these close games we've been in. Like, it has to be genuine and honest. Tony says, I'm so sick of put it on me. Well, Daboll, let's do just that. NYOG says, will Mayo getting let go give Mara cover? I don't think so. I think it actually reflects what the Giants should do, that another team is doing what they should do on a shorter timeline. Can't keep making excuses for this head coach. Apparently needs Josh Allen to be an average head coach, says Jamal. Let's see. Mike says, hopefully, this was before I jumped on a few minutes late here. He said, hopefully Pat is in a secret meeting with Mara and Tish explaining why Shane and Daboll need to be let go. That's funny. Yes, Nick Gates on the Eagles, who are in the playoffs. I'm a fan, says Shane and Daboll got to go. Need to get GMing and head coach. Otherwise, another wasted year. Another Shane draft will set them back even further. Tony doesn't think the NFL office will like the look from the Patriots. Let's see. Gerald hopes the Giants don't bring in a stopgap guy for quarterback like Carson Wentz. I'm watching him now. He sucks. Imagine doing that and telling fans they should like what they see. Will says, can anyone explain what Tish's role is in all of this? Is this just a hobby for him? No, Tish has just gone through a lot in recent years. Don't think he's been the factor or had the involvement that he has had in recent years. Here's how I view this. This is the God's honest truth. If they retain Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, to me it reflects that there's a different ownership dynamic at play here, because in the past, and this is something I was teasing for you guys throughout the season that I firmly believe was going to be a major factor here. I know over the years there have been plenty of situations where, multiple major situations with regime changes where John Mara and Steve Tisch have been having the conversation about what to do, where Mara had one idea, even though he knew maybe change should happen, and Steve Tisch put his foot down and say enough is enough. There have also been situations where Tisch and Mara had a slight disagreement on who should go and who should stay, and they've split the baby and compromised. And so if they are to bring them both back, I view that as a softer involvement or a softer take from someone in Steve Tisch who has been more firm and less tolerant of bad football in the past. That would be my, and listen, not just Steve Tisch, but like the Tisch family in general, because if Steve has taken a step back, then Jonathan Tisch and his family, obviously they still own half of the team in the franchise, right? So, that's something to take a look at. All right, let's see. Mike says, we're not getting a top quarterback this draft, so we will suck again next year, and then we will get our quarterback. It's been a rough 12 years. One more year of eating crap would be worth it. And YOG. Yeah, this is a good point here by Gerald, is that let's say the Giants do get a quarterback at 3 or in the first round, or if they trade up. These quarterbacks are not obvious, like home run. Oh, they're clearly going to change the franchise guys either. Tim, yes, I think they should fire both of them. Braden says, hey, Pat, with the restructuring of Watson's contract, is there a world where the Browns settle on another position, possibly tackle or trade back? Braden, I think I was thinking about that. I was talking to some people about that right immediately after the Giants game today. And I think that you can hear the music here at the link is really loud. I'm sure you guys can hear it in the background. So sorry if that's gumming up the audio here. But you could make the argument that the Browns, because they have so much money on Watson, if they draft a rookie quarterback, they're not getting the benefit of the cheap rookie quarterback contract because they're still paying an exorbitant amount of money for Watson, right? So that's a problem. But at the same time, you can't keep trotting Watson out there, and half measures at quarterback in Cleveland is going to keep you irrelevant and in this position. Of course, that's an ownership problem. But, Myles Garrett has been vocal on his end about being fed up with what's going on there and not being pleased. There's a player, by the way, that every team in the league should be knocking on the door, So if Myles Garrett wants out of Cleveland, there's how everyone should spend their money and assets. Evan says, could the Patriots hire Daboll as offensive coordinator if he is fired? I guess they could. I mean, I don't view him based on his track record here as a candidate for any promising OC jobs. I mean, I don't see how he's earned that this year. There are people in the Giants who, don't have a very high opinion of that offense. So Johnny says 2024 basically had 3 number 1 pick quarterbacks, yet Schoen is such a poor talent evaluator, he couldn't see the compensation would have been worth it. Johnny, it's not just trading up for quarterbacks. What about Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr.? Bo Nix is in the playoffs. He's in the playoffs. Bo Nix is in the playoffs with a team that wasn't great. The Giants didn't draft him. I know Neighbors is a good player. He's very talented. Neighbors is very talented. Of course he is. But if you're going to argue that the Giants didn't have a chance to get the quarterback, right? People who would argue that, my goodness. John thinks this is going to be Titans take Cam Ward, Browns take Shedeur. And if Schoen is still here, he's going to reach for a quarterback instead of getting one in the later rounds. What if Shedeur pulls an Eli Manning and refuses to play in Cleveland and wants to play in New York? Not saying he will. I'm just saying. Craig says both should get fired. 2 draft busts from Schoen, who never built the O-line that Gettleman failed on. Daboll is not a good game manager, and attention to detail is awful. Too many pre-snap infractions. Gerald does not want another rookie head coach. Bring in a veteran, someone else, I don't know who, but not a young guy, when he talks about if Daboll is fired. John says, I'm okay bringing them back to face the 2025 schedule. Just don't allow them to take a quarterback. Blow them out next year and let the new regime draft a quarterback. NY2PA says, someone tell me what happens if we do the same thing we did this year and run it back. Should we fire both or just one? Well, to me, you go a 4th year and it doesn't pan out. I mean, you fire both, in my opinion. Let's see. NYOG, yeah, we were just talking about that. You asked that question earlier. You're ahead of the game there. Myles Garrett's definitely a player that everybody should have on their radar for sure. He's also a guy who I would think will flex his muscles on where he goes if he goes. John says, if Daboll gets fired but Shane stays, I'm not going to support at all next season. I'll stay home every home game. NYOG doesn't think Dexter Lawrence likes Bowen as defensive coordinator. I would say just in general, I think the Giants coaching staff, from my vantage point, sucks up to Dexter Lawrence. I would say a guy who was clearly not a good fit and didn't seem to take at all to this defensive staff is Bobby Okereke, the middle linebacker. Francis thinks the owners are keeping both. Big Blue Steph says, why would Daboll get into that conversation in a post-game presser? Well, he might, Steph, if he felt the need to defend himself. So obviously there are people now, like some people who on this chat, who think because he didn't act like he felt like he needed to defend himself, he thinks they're going to, they believe that means he thinks he's safe. But I don't view that as he's definitely safe. I think that's just him trying not to add fuel to the fire. Tuto! Where you been, Tuto? Great to hear from you, my man. Tuto Azurdi. Love and respect to Big Boss Pat and all diehard Giants fans across the pond. Greetings from our entire Italian rugby team currently in Paris, France. Forget about it. Paris, how is it, Tuto? Man, I've never been to Paris. I've been to Italy, I've been to London, and I've been to Sweden. That's the extent of my European trips and treks so far. Good to hear from you, though. I think I heard from you last on Revival. That was a fun podcast to do, those guys. Hefe and the bunch. And, I know you hate these stinky Boyds, and the Giants do too. Unfortunately, 12 straight losses now at Lincoln Financial Field by the Giants, dating back to 2013. That is their most consecutive losses, Tuto, in any single stadium. Crazy stat. All right, let's see. Great to hear from you, Tuto. John thinks Bowen is a horrible hire. He finally played to this team's strengths by bringing some type of pressure. Talking about this last game. Yeah, against Eagles backups. Gronk just said on halftime show McDaniels as Pat's OC. There's rumors. Yes, right. It would be Vrabel as head coach, Josh McDaniels, offensive coordinator. Yep, I'd heard the same thing. Steven says offseason, Pat, 0-0. It's a good thing. Tony points out, well, pick number 3 is better than pick number 9. Way better, no doubt. Hopefully Vrabel gets a job and takes Bowen with him, says Johnny. Yeah, that's the belief, is that Bowen will follow Vrabel wherever he goes. So if Bowen does leave, then the Giants could turn over the defensive coordinator position without saying we fired Shane Bowen, right? That's where I think a Lou Anarumo could step in if he wasn't retained by Cincinnati. K Smart with a $5 super chat. K Smart, thank you so much. Let's see. Tracy reminded me to preach. Thanks, Tracy. Let's see. Alex says they don't care about us at all, the fans who pay for it. Very sad. Almighty Finesse likes Shador, but he's okay with Hunter at 3. Dan says, thank God it's finally over. G-Man points out ownership is in a terrible position is an understatement. They will lose a great number of season ticket holders, and the stadium will become a home stadium for visiting teams. Stretch says if Cam and Sanders are gone, draft Travis Hunter and go get Jackson Dart in round 2. Tony likes Dart as well. KJ says, looking at the Giants' opponents next season, will they go 0-17? Ouch. Tracy says, being a season ticket holder no longer has the prestige it once had. It's painful. Mara accepting what the product is unacceptable. No doubt. That's what it comes down to. This is just not an acceptable product. And if you retain these guys, you're telling the fans you think it is. That's it. Bobby says they can't fire just one. It would be awful. John P. points out the coaching staff never takes advantage of matchups. Burns in coverage on the only playmaker tight end to start the game. How about you put a blue chip pass rusher against a backup tackle? Interesting point. Tracy says, I wish I could skip a year, but then I would lose my PSLs. Alex says Joe Schoen is BFF with Chris Mara, so I'll be surprised if they fire him because he's a first-class BSer. Without getting into that specific comment about those two guys, I will say Joe Schoen is political. He can play the political game. That is for sure. Tuto says, Pat, we've suffered a massive loss here in Paris to French loses 45-38 and officially eliminated from Super Rugby playoffs yesterday. Heading home tomorrow, mate. Tuto, sorry to hear that, man. Sorry to hear that. What round was that in? That seems like a hard-fought match, as they would say. Be proud, though. It's the battle. The battle is part of the process, right? Or as Brian Daboll would say, I appreciate the question, but let's see. Kevin says, you can't not buy season tickets. We paid for PSLs. They got us by the balls. Francis says, even with the piss poor play, people will still buy Giants tickets. Don't worry about it. Greg says, this is still a great day for Giants fans. We can get Travis Hunter. Dan says, posted my PSLs on the marketplace yesterday, crossing my fingers to get some offers. Jay Stewart says, the Giants need a quarterback. Look what Jaden Daniels did in Washington. Yep. Tracy says, we have no choice to buy the tickets. You do not understand how this works. Some people paid $10,000 a seat. Can't even get $1,000 for them now. Wow. The fact you have to pay for a license to have the privilege of buying season tickets to watch this garbage is asinine, says Johnny. Greg says Dart is a system guy, processes information too slowly, and is prone to making mistakes when pressured. Greg wants Kyle McCord in the second. Gerald says watching Colorado play Sanders wouldn't be anything without Travis Hunter. He made all the plays on that team. Let's see. Dave Z says, John Mara and Steve Tisch must be so embarrassed as they cash in their millions from hardworking fans like us. Gerald says, everyone hated Daniel Jones for holding the ball too long. Sanders does the same thing. Kevin says, Pat, if you were Mara next season, who is the GM, head coach, quarterback, and your splash free agent signing? Let's get into that after Black Monday and where we go from there. But I listed, guys that I'm interested in talking to. Depending on what happens in Dallas, Mike McCarthy, Kevin Stefanski, depending on what happens in Cleveland. Obviously, all the top names, if you could poach them away, the Ben Johnsons. Vrabel, you wish you had the type of infrastructure that would attract him. Those are some names that come to mind. But, yeah, I'm not ready to lay out my full offseason plan yet, Kevin. But what I would do, I would make sure that I understood that all three positions that you just mentioned, general manager, head coach, quarterback, were positions that I need to attack and fix immediately. This can't be a partial fix. It can't be, putting lipstick on a pig or a Band-Aid on a broken ankle type thing. Braden says, Pat, do you think if the Patriots bring in Vrabel, they go out and make a push for a Tannehill-like build and Sam Darnold? And if that falls through, who do they look to next? Is Travis Hunter possible? Yeah, I mean, I think, well, New England is going to be drafting behind the Giants, but yes, Hunter is a player who the Patriots would absolutely take, who could help them given the fact that they have Drake May already. No, I think where you drafted Drake May, and I think people have a high opinion of him, like I think that's a player that you want to have on the field. I don't think you want to take him off the field. Let's see. Yeah, like I don't view that as like the same as J.J. McCarthy coming in as a rookie, battling for competition. Do you want to play him? He's still trying to earn his way. I think you do want to have May on the field. And if I'm Darnold, just had a really strong season with Kevin O'Connell in a dome. Am I trying to go play in New England? I don't know. Though I guess obviously if that's where the money is, that's where the money is. But, you know, with Drake May there, quarterback of the future, I don't know. All right, let's see. NYY says, I knew this was a 5-year operation. Some of you were expecting miracles. Team will improve. Give it 2 more years. Keep Schoen and Daboll. Man, if only Ben McAdoo, Pat Shurmur, and Joe Judge got 5 years. I mean, this NYY, I think, not to belittle your statement or your opinion. I mean, I think that's a completely fair opinion to have, that like you think it was so bad it's going to take a while. I think in the modern NFL, you look at so many other teams around the league that are able to do it fairly quickly, and it doesn't look like people who haven't done it before and are learning on the job and making colossal mistakes with premier draft picks. Like I just think there's too many examples of teams doing it the right way versus the Giants doing it the wrong way. Tuto says, Pat, in my opinion, doesn't make sense drafting a quarterback without a smart head coach, solid O-line, and unreliable receivers, mate. Giants got bigger problems, too many holes to fill. Yeah, so to me, that I don't disagree with that, Tuto, because like if you use your premier pick on a quarterback who's a developmental project with the roster you have in place, and you have some cap space, but as I listed, not as much as 12 teams above you or something right now. So as the Giants, like, are you surrounding that quarterback with a good team next year? And then what does that mean for the coach, the general manager, the program? You know, I don't disagree with you, Tuto. I think if you start fresh, like to answer, I think it was Kevin's question earlier asking me what I would do. I think I like the idea of bringing in a new GM and coach, having fresh eyes, better, more experienced eyes in both seats on the roster and on the program. And then you do need to stock the roster. And if you're not enamored with this quarterback class, then you have somebody who doesn't need to force that. And you can keep building the roster with pieces and then strike where the iron's hot. You know, when the great quarterback comes available, or when the next year when the draft looks a lot stronger. All right, let's see. John P. says, I don't understand the game plan either. I honestly thought it was going to be the Lock Neighbors show and drop another 40 on a backup secondary. Yeah, it was very strange how the Giants approached this game coming off of a win over the Colts. Like you're winning one and not another. GCN says Atlanta wasted $90 million on Cousins. Look at Penix. Oh, yeah. No, Atlanta has their own problems, right? Like, I think they took a good quarterback in the draft. But, yeah, that was total mismanagement on their part. And really, that's just people not being on the same page. Like, that's another organization with its own problems. That team also beat the Giants about 100-0. Let's see. But, yeah, like, to me, Raheem Morris should be fired too. I don't think Raheem Morris should keep working as the Falcons head coach. Juan wouldn't touch Darnold. He is in the right system situation. The GCN says he's a good quarterback and bring in Ben Johnson as coach. Well, that's the guy I want if I'm anybody right now needing a coach. Daniel says, Pat, we will still suck next year, so this regime will be out next season anyway. That's possible if they retain them, Daniel. I think, though, like in the NFL, and I think this is for owners and regimes and franchises, it just doesn't work like that in the NFL that you burn a year. Like franchises don't burn years. I mean, I guess some have, but like that would be new to me to experience firsthand. Like, well, we'll just keep them because we'll probably suck next year anyway. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You're not wrong that might happen, though. Greg says the Giants need to get back to playing championship-level defense and worry about the offense after. Paul says, come to Newtown, PA, Pat. Not a bad idea. GCN says the Daily News should have ordered you a car and a driver for the drive back. Wouldn't that be nice? That would cost money. Juan says, I'm more fearful of Schoen. I wouldn't put it past him to trade a bunch of picks for the first and mortgage the future. Let's see. Greg also points out they need to solidify linebacker. Daniel says, Pat, what about college coaches? Who would want to come to the Giants? Anyone of note the Giants would be interested in? How about the Notre Dame coach, Marcus Freeman? Haven't heard anything about the Giants trying to hire Marcus Freeman. Freeman obviously has been excellent with Notre Dame this season, and that team has been excellent. The defense has been excellent with Al Golden as the coordinator. Go Irish. Hopefully they win the Natty. That'd be nice. Haven't heard anything specifically about that, but I wouldn't hate looking there. I would just say head coach in college is nothing like head coach in the pros. So for those of you who want experience and no first timers, I would say just be careful. Freeman also signed a new contract extension recently, but I would just say be careful on, like college experience is not pro experience. Jose says, thanks for the awesome year, Pat. Love the show and looking forward to more next year. Thank you, Jose. Appreciate you. Respect. Let's see. GCN says Shane's mistake was not cutting all the bad contracts from day one. They were $5 million under the cap with a terrible Gettleman. Who were they spending money on? Ashley says Daboll calling plays this year was a disaster. GCN says, Pat, add more RAM to your computer. Yeah, I got to delete a bunch of stuff for sure. Been loading up the laptop. This is end of season problems, right? Alex says, Pat, thanks for keeping the fans looped in and the honest takes. You got it. You're welcome, Mark. Thank you. Daniel, Ron Rivera wouldn't be my pick. I think got really vanilla with his defensive scheme with Del Rio at the end in Washington, and respected person, but not a great head coach in my opinion. Jacob says, I blame us not tanking properly on your piano, Pat. Yeah, I love it on those fake backgrounds. Iconic says, Pat, I don't understand how we can bring them both back. Thanks for a good season of Talkin' Ball. Thank you. More to come in 2025 here, too. Really excited about it. Really excited about it. More announcements coming. Jim Rat says, listen, at first I was on the side of keeping them both. After today and 17 games of penalties and how sparse our talent on our roster is, can them both and start fresh with a new team. And he says, I was on the side at first of keeping the coach and GM another year. Jamal says, I don't want to hear about how bad our quarterback room is when I saw Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph have winning records in certain situations. Joey B says, I can see them drafting Carson Beck, and I don't like that. Giant Goofball says, don't hit the reset by keeping the same people. New coach, new GM, new quarterback, new era. D. Grant, the NFL started playing 17 games, I think, was it 3 seasons ago? I think. T. Patrick says, hire Rex Ryan and rebuild through the defense. Select that linebacker from Penn State. Great start. NYOG suggests Nick Saban. Hirsch says winning that game against the Colts killed us. Let's see. James wants Antonio Pierce for defensive coordinator. Timothy says, Pat, is this the worst season you've covered? Yes. Yes, it is. And you know what? It doesn't matter what, like people say, what I want or what I'm looking for or what I'm trying to make happen. You know, that's none of that's true. That's not what I'm doing. But running this regime back will just make next season so tiresome and frustrating because it's going to be more of the same and it's going to keep the Giants irrelevant until they make changes. So it's just going to be stretching out already unacceptable football. James says, yes. For Pat, I can answer that. Yes. Worst 10 to 15 year stretch since the 70s. Mike Tomlin is an amazing coach, JC. Craig says, who will hold Mara accountable to I need to see progress? Oh, yeah, definitely. No doubt about it. We will if we talk to him, if and when we talk to John Mara. Guys, this has been a phenomenal chat. Really appreciate all of you guys being here on Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard. Can't thank you enough for all your support, especially the super chatters. Super chatters tonight, who I want to thank personally. Chris Spires a couple times, Joel Lopez, Mark Sullivan a couple times, John, Steve Keys, Ryan H., Joey B a couple times, NYC, Into, Yardley, Candyman, Tuto, K Smart, and Tuto rolled in a few times down the stretch to support the pod and support the channel and support our YouTube here on the Believe Network and on Talkin' Ball with Pat Leonard here on the Believe Network. Dan, I see you saying I didn't read one of your comments all season. I did not. I was not aware of that. Dan, drop in a comment that you want read, and I'll read it. This was actually a really long chat, so after all the super chats and the fact that I've been going an hour and 50 minutes, I just then started skimming through and finding things I felt like I hadn't talked about yet. So wasn't skipping you on purpose there or anything. But Dan Orthside, please throw in what you would like to be answered, and I'll answer it before we get out of here. Let's see. Dan says, thanks for that, Pat. I appreciate it. Do you think that if John and Steve need a tiebreaker, they would call Bill Parcells? That's an interesting question, Dan. I think Parcells is definitely somebody who, has a relationship with Joe Schoen from Miami. There was that connection and that kind of, mutual understanding and relationship there when Shane got hired. I think that Parcells, I could be wrong about this. This is just my answer off the cuff based on knowing how these football organizations work and how these coaches and executives treat or handle each other. I think Parcells would give his opinion if asked, but I don't think he would, in a heavy-handed way, come over top and tell the Giants how to run their franchise without being in it himself. I think he would provide guidance if asked. So, yes, that could mean that they go to him and get his 2 cents. But I feel like, Dan, they've all, Bill Parcells vouched for Joe Schoen, his character, his ability, who he was as general manager, having worked with him together, all that kind of thing, gives him his blessing. And that's at the beginning. But I don't think at this point Bill Parcells is in the room as the Giants decision maker saying, here's the job Joe Schoen did and here's why he deserves to stay or go. To me, as much as Parcells is who he is in Giants history and in NFL history, that can't be the person making the decision on Joe Schoen. I think that has to be the owners. And I think that you can solicit his opinion. I would be more interested, Dan, in if and when you fire Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. Here's what I think. And I think somebody on here suggested something like this before. Then you assemble your roundtable. Tom Coughlin, Bill Parcells, right? Harry Carson, Leonard Marshall, Phil Simms, Carl Banks. You get a lot of these Giants legends, important people to your franchise and organization together, and you have a summit and a conversation, an honest conversation about what has gone wrong, what the organization isn't doing right, what it needs to do better. I don't think that's a bad idea. But then the conversation needs to expand from there. It can't be, hey, it's only Giants people involved, and we need to tell each other what ideally we know that John Mara and Steve Tisch and the Giants organization want to hear. You need to also expand it. Hope that answers your question. Let's see. JC points out that people think all good quarterbacks are inevitable. Not true. Many need a good support system. When they succeed, people just think it was inevitable. Very smart point, JC. Very smart point. Baker Mayfield, Darnold, Geno, all good examples of that. Very astute observation by JC. Hard to disagree with. Also, a good example of why it's fair to independently evaluate a Kevin O'Connell, Brian Daboll, these offensive coaches around the league. Would Sam Darnold be having the same success in New York right now that he's had in Minnesota? No, because of the roster around him and the coaching he's getting. GCN, when the season is over, I continue to report on the NFL. To be honest, GCN, I've done more Giants specific this year than I had been in the past. The last 2 years, I came back to doing a lot of Giants and a little bit of national to complement it as far as my writing goes. But a lot of the phone calls and the sourcing and the work I'm doing when I'm not on camera is league-wide stuff. I was our NFL column. I am our NFL columnist, but I was writing weekly NFL columns and a lot of daily national stories for the Daily News for several years once Gary Myers left the Daily News. The Daily News has wanted for our local readership more of a concentration on the Giants end. But I continue to expand and grow on the national side, and that's part of what my podcast is doing. When I do Talkin' Ball and talk to different guests, have different guests on the show, including Benny Fowler. Weekly, we talk around the league, not just Giants. And looking forward to, Senior Bowl, Super Bowl, NFL Combine, NFL owners meetings, the draft. I'm doing all of that. So it's all NFL, not just Giants, and I expand league-wide, cover this coaching searches, the GM searches, the hirings, the firings, all of that. Hunter, thanks for wishing me a safe travels home. Here's to hope for a new start. Let's see. Right, Arch is not coming out till 2027. Tiger wants everybody to go. Miguel says, so you're going to suck for 2 years and pray you suck bad enough to get Arch Manning? That makes no sense. Yeah, and that brings me to the conclusion of this podcast, which is to say, Tiger, Happy New Year to you too, which is to say that if you're an NFL franchise and you're a landmark franchise like the Giants, you don't burn years. You don't burn teams. You don't say, well, maybe we'll suck next year, but then we'll figure it out from there. You don't tell the fans that it's raining when something else is trickling on top of their head. You have to be honest. You have to be forthright, and you have to be able to self-evaluate your roster, your personnel, your leadership, your GM, your coach. The fact of the matter is, if the Giants retain this regime, it either means they're incompetent or they're ignorant or they're both. I think the bottom line is retaining this coach and general manager will be the Giants announcing to their fan base that they have lowered the standard of what they consider acceptable. And they will, like I said, be confusing being in the dark so long and being able to see that they've been in the dark so long. They will be confusing that with the lights coming on, having an epiphany, and climbing out of the darkness into the light and having a competent organization, program, and roster. I believe that the Giants will be doing the fan base a disservice if they retain this coach and general manager. And I do believe that even though the reports today, here Sunday, January 5th, have been that they're leaning towards being safe, I still think there's a chance the coach is fired, and I still think there's a chance they're both fired after these meetings, but we will see where it goes. Going to skip out on the Estate 98 trivia for tonight, but I anticipate another Talkin' Ball Live coming soon, given that we're going to have an announcement one way or another, or news one way or another on whether they're staying or going. And so we will come in hot with some Giants trivia. Maybe I'll do a double Estate 98 trivia on the next Talkin' Ball Live, and we'll give out some free Estate 98 coffee on our next Talkin' Ball. Hook says, thanks for the content, Pat. Hope we get great players with our picks and develop into a winner. Again, who do you have winning the Super Bowl? That will be a conversation for our postseason preview. This has been Talkin' Ball Live with Pat Leonard, postgame here from Lincoln Financial Field on the Believe Network and on the YouTube channel PL on NFL, brought to you by MyBookie, Boom Chaga, and Estate 98 Coffee. MyBookie rolling out the red carpet for sports bettors this football season. I'll be making picks all the way through the postseason and the Super Bowl. Click on the link in my bio and all my social media accounts. You can find it there, mybookie.ag. Use the promo code PATSPICKS, PATSPICKS. Make your first deposit and get a 50% match on that first deposit, $50 or more, all the way up to $1,000, plus a $10 casino chip. Also brought to you by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. Personally, I felt a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today. Place your first order. Use that code TalkinBall25 or the QR code on your screen and get 25% off your first order on the subscribe and save option. Start feeling the difference today at boomchaga.com. And brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, a specialty all-natural coffee concentrate that helps you skip the lines, makes a quick 10-second cup of iced or hot, delicious Estate 98 iced coffee or hot coffee. It's great for an espresso martini mixer, and each bottle can make up to 16 cups. Go to estate98.com/talkinball to get a special 80% off exclusive discount on your first order. So, I'm a fan says, good night, drive safe. So does NYOG. Hirsch says, peace out. Braden says, drive safe, Pat. Appreciate all the work you do. Thank you. Great season of your shows, Pat, says Simeon. Thank you, Simeon, for saying that. Joey B says, love this, Pat. When is the next one? We'll see, Joey B. It could be tomorrow night. Our next Talking Ball Live could be Monday night, depending on what happens tomorrow. It could be Tuesday. I would anticipate it will be one of the first 3 days of this week, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. But I will keep you guys updated on social media. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to the Super Chatters and all of you dedicated Talking Ballers, listeners, viewers. Please hit subscribe or the like button on your way out. That helps engagement. Thank you for being here. Thank you all. See you next time.